Hey, I'm ZSH Plays, and a while ago I spent 2 months building a nocturnal zoo. It opens exclusively at night, it features lots of beautiful nocturnal animals, and I've edited the whole series into a 70-minute supercut. I really hope you enjoy it. Today we're going to use the incredible walkthrough exhibits to build a huge aviary for the Egyptian fruit bat. So we're here on a brand new map. Let's jump in and start building. The first thing to say is that these walkthrough exhibits are absolutely incredible. When they announced them, I thought they were going to be basically just an exhibit box, but bigger, with a path through the middle of it. But they are much more interesting than that. The sides and the ceilings of them, you can choose whether they're solid like this, glass, mesh, or just completely blank, so you can't see that they're a box at all, which is what I think we've all been wanting for a very long time. I'll show you how we do that in a minute, but let's get on to building the huge aviary that we're going to put around the side of them. So what I'm going to do is I've just put 3 of them there for the moment in a sort of joined up path kind of way, and then we're going to build a huge aviary that surrounds them, and then at the end of it the boxes will be completely invisible. Just the little nesting boxes and feeders and things like that for the bats inside. They're not free flying, they are on sort of looped animations, but there are so many different animations and you can have so many bats in each one that it looks absolutely amazing. I've had so much fun building this habitat. Where are we, by the way? This is a brand new zoo. It's going to be called the Moonlight World, and it's going to be a little sandbox zoo like the wetlands, which is going to focus mainly on the animals from New Twilight Pack, but with loads of other nocturnal animals as well. It's based loosely on the Singapore Night Safari, which is a really cool zoo I'd absolutely love to go to one day, which basically only opens in the evening and through the night, and there's predominantly nocturnal animals in it. So we're going to have all the animals from the new pack, I think. But we are starting off with these bats because I was just so excited when I opened the exhibit box for the first time and realised how much more powerful than the normal exhibits it is. So we're building the aviary up here. Going to give it a bit of a slope at the top of the roof just to make it look nice and interesting. And then, as usual, we will rotate it many times until we have a nice looking aviary. And it should look seamless inside, so when you're walking through it you can't tell that there are any exhibit boxes anywhere or anything like that. It just looks like one huge open habitat. I'll show you in the cinematics at the end, but it definitely works. So I'm just going to copy a bit more of this mesh across to make sure there's no sort of gaps or holes in the aviary. And then that's the outer structure of it pretty much done. And I'm going to start putting these aviaries exactly where I want them so they line up. They've got the like PVC strips as doors as well. And again, you can remove those. And that is a separate piece in the game now as well, which is so good. I've done a couple of zoo tours recently where people have built their own, which was really cool, but the sort of official in-game piece looks even better, and you don't have to bother building it, so that's really good. And then I think I'm going to put an extra aviary in as well, just so there's some more bats sort of off in the distance, and we'll get the path to go along there as well. We'll have a path running all the way through this with a couple of choices of where the guests can go. And I'm just marking out the centre of the aviary so we can put a support in there and make sure none of the exhibit boxes are in the way of that. Now, let's take a look at what you can do with the exhibit boxes. So as soon as we put a bat in, they turn into mesh, which already looks awesome, and it's going to be so good for building aviaries because you don't need to actually do much building if you're wanting a sort of a square mesh aviary, bit of wood on it, and that's all you need. But let's take a look at the thing that got me really excited. There's a little bat now. Let's select the exhibit box and then choose to get rid of the mesh. And there we go. We'll get rid of the doors as well, because I'm going to put my own doors a bit further out of the aviary itself. But once we've got rid of those, it is invisible. We've just got these basic little perch points for the bats, and then you can choose loads and loads of new perch points, bat boxes, fruit stands, ropes, all kinds of stuff for them to fly between and roost on. And yeah, once we've got the rest of these sorted, it really is just going to be one huge aviary with a few little perch points dotted about, and we can get on with decorating it and making it look exactly the way that we want to do. So last one, there we go. Let's sort these paths out so we get the wood chippings going all the way around, and then I'm going to put another path in as well so that the guests have got a choice which way to go round, and it sort of stops congestion and things like that as well. So we'll join that back up with the main path here, and we're leaving a sort of blank space in the middle where we can put in some supports, and we're going to fill it all in with a nice sort of jungle vibe as well. Going to make an entrance now. So this is the separate PVC door that I talked about. We'll have a couple of those to make an airlock. I'm going to make this twice as long as it looks here in the end, because this was a bit small once I'd looked at it properly. But yeah, we'll fill it all in with mesh, and then we'll get a nice sign up on the top of it with the Flying Forest name that I decided on. Any reason to get flying into Planet Zoo is always cool. We'll use the plant boards, which I like to use as a backing for signs, because they've got a really cool wood texture on the back. And then we'll put a big sign on that glows in the dark, which will be kind of appropriate for this Twilight Zoo. There's the sign. This is made from the glowing font pack by Sleepy Koala Girl. It's a great little font. It's flexi color as well, so you can choose what color it glows. It looks amazing at night. But yeah, so between here and the entrance, we'll have a North American area for the raccoon and the striped skunk. We are going to have an African area and I think a European area, maybe an Asian area. I've never really done a zoo by geography rather than by biome before, so I thought that would be a cool idea. And obviously there is a lot of nocturnal species in the game now, so we should be able to make some really cool habitats in this zoo. So what I'm going to do now is start decorating the inside of the habitat. I'm just choosing which ones of the sort of pre-made pieces to use for each exhibit. We'll put the central support in as well. We're going to put one of the Twilight Pack pieces up on the roof at the end of the video as well, which I think it's from like a, supposed to be for a sort of a spooky castle, but it actually looks really cool, topping off the dome of this aviary. And then we'll put a load of plants in. You can see a load of foliage all the way around the background of the zoo. I've done what I always done, which is make a little area of plants that looks really good. Loads of different Asian plants. Here we go. And then you just drop that in and copy it all over the map, rotating it, making the odd little change so it doesn't look like it's been copy and pasted. And yeah, it just really brings it to life in here. I love how big it looks, like the how expansive, I think is the word I'm looking for. The whole aviary looks, and you really just cannot tell that there are little exhibit boxes in here. I really hope they add that option to the standard exhibit boxes in the next update, because that would absolutely transform using those animals. You could start having iguanas in outside habitats, or making sort of habitats or exhibits rather that look like they're really tiny in your reptile house or whatever. But these I think will keep me busy for a while anyway. I absolutely love this bat exhibit. I thought I'd put a little bit of a pond in here as well, just because it looks nice really. And IRL, I think the bats would use that. They've got little water troughs which they drink from in the game, but I've seen in Africa, I saw bats dive bombing a swimming pool to have a drink. I hope it wasn't chlorinated, or they won't be enjoying that too much. Let's move on to the final stage, which is getting some lights and a few last bits and pieces in. I'm going to put a load of lights in. Obviously lighting is going to be really important. This entire zoo will be set between sort of dusk and actual nighttime, depending on what looks best. And that's the Flying Forest complete. Here it is. I absolutely love how the bats look flying around in this massive aviary. Once you take the walls off of the walkthrough exhibits, they are absolutely amazing. Next up, we're going to be building habitat for raccoons. Let's have a quick check on our progress, and then we'll start building the habitat using the raccoon scale of 4,000, which according to Planet Zoo is the smallest space that a raccoon can possibly fit through. To be honest with you, I'm not sure I trust it, but according to the heat map, they will be able to fit through this space. So we're going to use it to build a tiny overpass for the raccoons so they can walk over the guests between the two different parts of the habitat that you can see here. So let's get building. What I want is for each habitat in this zoo to have something unique about it. like we did with the wetland zoo. And so for this raccoon habitat, it's going to be a tiny little overpass for them. So I've only ever built one animal overpass before, which was the huge sky bridge for the giant otters at Tecton Zoo. So it's going to be really fun trying to build a more sort of realistic one that you might see in a zoo with mesh, using the chain pieces from the Twilight Pack, which are already one of my favourite pieces in the game. And we'll build that and do some testing with the raccoons and see if they can get through it. More on that later. But let's start building the actual habitat. So according to the care manuals, the raccoons need a smooth wall that they can't climb, i.e. like the concrete that I'm using here, which needs to be at least 1.2 meters tall, and it also needs an overhang to prevent them from being able to climb over it. So this wall should IRL keep raccoons in, and obviously in the game, I think they need 3 meters in the game, but if you use construction pieces rather than the in-game barriers, then they will basically stop anything because they can't be climbed. So raccoons are going to be contained with this. That's not going to be an issue. I'm going to build them a really big habitat because, as you can see, it's split in half by this path. There's going to be a moat on both sides of the path to keep the raccoons from getting onto the path, and then the only way to get between the two different sides of the habitat will be the overpass that we're going to build, and that'll ensure that the raccoons use it loads. So I've copied it all the way around, and we're just going to delete the pieces that cross over the path to keep it nice and clean looking, and then we'll move on to the rest of the habitat. So I'm going to drop some rocks in here. One of the best tips I ever had for Planet Zoos, if you ever make anything that you like that's kind of generic, rocks and things like that, always save it as a blueprint, and then the next time you need a pile of rocks, you don't have to build the whole thing again. So those, I think they're from the Land of the Leopard episode of Planet Wild, and they're going to form sort of the barrier of the moat. So the moat's going to go under the path, which is why I've deleted the path so that we can get the moat in here. We'll put it back in a minute. And then I'm going to lay concrete all down the sides of the path so the raccoons can't get between each side of the habitat without using the overpass. So we'll connect that up to the path leading into the flying forest, and then get back to this habitat. So more rocks on the other side, a bit of rotating and adjusting the height so they don't look exactly the same. And then I'm going to make a little pool for the raccoons to chill out in, maybe wash their food in, as they like to do in zoos. And we'll drag that into place and then fill that with water using the glass barriers so that we don't have to muck around with the terrain, and so you can get much better control of the height of the water. And we're going to completely hide this with rocks so it looks just like a little pool, a rock pool I guess, in the habitat for them to use. And the way I'm going to make the habitat work is that on this side I'm going to fill it with all their enrichment items, and then on the other side they're going to have their food and shelter, and that way that's going to keep sort of constant traffic of raccoons going from one side of the habitat to the other. Whenever they want to play, they'll be on this side, and when they want to eat or sleep, they'll be on the other side, because we want to get that overpass in use as much as possible. So I spent ages on this little rock pool, but I really wanted it to look good. It's one of the features of the habitat. We need some... Raccoons aren't the biggest animals, and this is a pretty sizable habitat, and it's going to be at night when the guests are here. So you want a way of getting the raccoons pretty close to the guests without them being able to escape. So I've made a few features that are up high like this to bring them closer to the path, to make sure that we can get a good view of them, especially once the sun goes down. We'll do a load of lighting as well. Obviously, that's really important in this zoo. Not something I've ever really bothered with before. I don't think there's barely any lights in Tecton Zoo, because I never ran the zoo at night. It's shut at like 5 PM or whenever I set it to in the menu. But with this one, it opens at I think it's like 6 PM if I recall correctly, and then is open throughout the night. So we're going to need loads of lights, so we will get those in a bit later. And I'm just using these rocks to make sure that the raccoons can actually get up here. And then we'll finish it off with a bit of moss, and later on we'll come back and put all the enrichment items in so they can use it. I raise the bottom as well so that it's not somewhere where they go swimming, it's somewhere where they can sort of sit in or just wash their food in. So just finish that off and then we will move on. So we'll take care of a bit of terrain painting now and start getting this habitat to look the way that we want it to. This is the first time I have ever built on a tropical map, which is like the most popular map in Planet Zoo. So it's been really fun exploring all the new terrain options here. We'll put the barriers in, all null barriers, no need for any real barriers because of the concrete pieces. And the way it's going to work, obviously you can only have one habitat gate. So I'm going to put the actual habitat gate here and get some mesh and things like that in it to keep the raccoons in. And then we're going to put an implied habitat gate on the other side, so it looks like the keepers can get to both sides of the habitat, but really they can only get to one side of it. But because it's only enrichment items on this side and they reset themselves automatically when the keepers come into the habitat, there's no need for the keepers in game to actually be able to get over to this side of it. And like I say, it's important that there is no other way for the raccoons to get from one side to the other, or they're not going to use this overpass, which predictably enough is bigger than it started out, because whilst the raccoons can walk through that tiny little space we saw at the beginning of the video, if it's on the floor, as soon as you put it into the air and they need to climb into it, suddenly the amount of space they need doubles. So I've had to make this bigger than it was originally, but it is still really small. I believe this is as small as it is possible to make, and I really like the way this looks once we get it all the way around the habitat. I'm going to curve it over the path so the guests get a great view as the raccoons run across it, and then we will join it up to some trees and a climbing frame and things like that on both sides of the habitat, so that the raccoons, like I say, use it a lot and go from one side to the other. I cannot even tell you how long it took to get this to work, going from building to the heat map and then back to building and then back to the heat map, and then finally, boom, the blue line showed up and the raccoons can get from one side to the other, and now we can get on with the rest of the habitat. So this is the implied entrance for the keepers that I mentioned, just so it all looks correct and it doesn't look like, you know, why or how do the keepers get from one side to the other. And then we're going to move on and take care of some theming. So this is going to be called Raccoon Woods. So I want quite a lot of trees. I can't actually get that many into the habitat. We don't want them climbing them and escaping, but we're certainly going to use some of the bristlecone pine branches to act as supports for the overpass. So we're going to use a few of these and then loads of the strangler fig roots and get that really sort of gnarly tree kind of look, old trees, slightly spooky, I guess you could say, in the center there, and then use some more of my favorite chain pieces to join the climbing platforms onto the overpass. Again, I really like this little piece. I decided to use it again as a feeder for them as well, just an implied feeder, so this will show up on the outside of their shelter as well when the build is done. This habitat is going to be the beginning of the North American area. We're going to have a couple more animals in this area, and then the bats will be the first habitat in our African area, and then after that we're going to have a European area, and then finally an Asian area. So it's going to be quite a small zoo when it's finished. That's sort of one of the things I base this on is a zoo called Tropical World here in the UK, which is really small, probably takes maybe an hour to get around it, and it's just a really fun place to spend a nice hour. Some cool animals, no like, you know, elephants or lions or anything like that, but just really nicely themed, really well thought out. And that's sort of the effect that I want to get here, although on a bit of a bigger scale. Moving on to the lighting now, and this is starting to look nice. This is what I want it to look like at night. We can have some red and yellow lights on the paths for the guests, and then some really subtle lighting in the habitat so that it's still dark for the animals. And we'll get on to the lighting solution that I've come up with a bit later in the video. But let's take care of their shelter now. So I built a really basic shelter for them, which was fun. I don't think I've ever built anything this kind of basic and realistic like you would see in loads of different zoos, rather than the really sort of over-the-top stuff that I like to build normally. So it was fun building something almost entirely out of mesh and wood. There's a little feeder thing I spoke about. We're going to put some bedding for them in here, and then we'll move on and start doing all the planting, shrubs, bushes, trees, etc. to get the habitat itself looking as lush as we want it to. And then finally, the last thing that we're going to do is build a pretty sizable lighting rig that I want to use throughout the entire zoo to light all the habitats. So this was kind of tricky. What I want is a custom light that we can put around the outside of all the habitats that actually lights the habitats really subtly for the animals so that they look good and they're not all sort of washed out. Obviously the habitats still need to be dark because they're nocturnal, but then the light itself still needs to actually look like it's lighting the habitat. And the trouble you get is I'm using like 4 lights combined here in order to make the light inside the habitat subtle enough that the habitat is still dark, just with little splashes of sort of purple and red light here and there. You have to have the contrast on the lights way down, almost to nothing. You can see me lowering it here till I get the effect I want. But when you do that, the lights no longer actually shine when you look at them, which looks kind of weird. So then I've had to hide loads of small lights inside the big lights to get them to look the way that I want. Lastly, we'll just put some ropes in to sort of keep it stable, and that is Raccoon Woods done. Here we go. One of the raccoons is climbing the tree that will lead them up to the overpass here, and then they can get onto the other side of the habitat and go and play with the sprinklers or wash some food in their pool. The raccoon models are so cute. Next up, we're going to build a habitat for the striped skunk, but again we'll take a quick look at the progress of the zoo first. Time for the skunks. So this is going to be the second habitat in the little North American area in the Moonlight world, just after the raccoons, and it's based on a real habitat in the Singapore Night Safari, which I saw a picture of, which I really like. It's got one unique little feature that's really cool that I don't think I've seen done before, which we'll get to a bit later on in the video. I can't actually remember what animal the habitat was for. I've got a photo, but you can't see the animal in the photo. I didn't sort of take note of what animal it was, but I'm presuming it is some kind of small mammal. Looks like that kind of habitat. We're going to use loads of the Twilight Pack pieces for this, starting with the mason walls, or mason brick walls, mason work walls, I can't remember what they're called, and these new wood planks, which I really like. Or rather these new wood planks, which I really like, which are a bit bigger. These are so versatile. I'm going to recreate the sort of wooden slats that were on the walls of the habitat, which is one of the things I really liked about it. So just loads of these spun around, moved into position, and then I'm going to subtly recolor each one so each plank isn't exactly the same color. It just creates a really nice sort of front for the habitat. Building it on this piece of wall so that it's on a grid so that we can just copy it around. This habitat's pretty much a rectangle, which is very unusual for one of my builds. Normally I try and avoid squares and rectangles as much as possible because they can be kind of boring, but this is a really nicely put together habitat, which I loved as soon as I saw the photo of it. So I think we'll be alright using this shape because that's what the real habitat looks like, and it's very attractive, so this should be cool. I'm going to put this right up against the path, and then use some of the really cool dirt texture that you get on the tropical map so that you can't see the join between the log chippings and the path. Going to use the new Twilight walls, or roofs rather, mixed in with one of the clay roofs from the base game to get a unique look on the roof. So I really want to try and match the real habitat as closely as possible, and we don't have sort of an exact version of that roof in the game, but I'm making 2 different groups with 2 different roof pieces in them, like you can see here. I'm going to combine them together. I'll sink the top one down and that'll make a nice roof pattern, and then we're going to raise the terrain on the inside of the habitat so it's so it brings the animals closer to the eye line of the guests. These skunks are absolutely tiny, definitely one of the smallest animals in the game, so we need to make sure that the viewing is going to be spot on for these guys. So remove the path so that I can get that all sorted, flatten it on the guest side of the habitat, and then we'll put the paths back in again, and then now they should be like right up to the habitat. Put a mesh roof in so the animals get some natural light. One of the unique things about this zoo, and one of the things that confuses me sometimes, is that building it for nocturnal animals, because it's open at night, rather than keeping them indoors and then having lights on all night and no lights during the day, so they're active in the day. You're actually just allowing them to live their sort of normal life cycles, and then trying to subtly light the habitat so that the guests can still see them when the guests are there at night. So we can actually put windows into the roof, unlike in a normal nocturnal house, so that's cool. Makes the lighting a bit more interesting. Going to put glass all the way around it, and then build some more interesting joins between the glass panes. These match the ones in the real habitat, just using some of the metal pole pieces that have been recolored. And then it's on to the unique aspect of the habitat, which is what caught my eye when I saw this real habitat. These trees, so painted onto the glass in the habitat are these shadows of trees all the way along. I have no idea what purpose they serve. Maybe from the animal's perspective, when they look out of the habitat, the outline of the guests staring at them is broken up by the trees. Maybe it feels more natural for them. Maybe it just looks cool. I have no idea, but I definitely think it looks cool, which is why I wanted to use them for this. And then I'm going to put like a jungle mural painting or photo at the back to make the habitat look a little larger than it is, because one of the things that they do in the Singapore night safari and any nocturnal house really is you've got to really make the habitats pretty small in order for the guests to be able to see the animals in the low lighting. So anything you can do to make it appear to be bigger than it is useful. We'll put their burrow in and do some terrain work around it so that it looks nice and natural. And we're going to do loads of bushes and shrubs around it as well, so it's partially hidden. And put lots of the little sleeping leaves as well, which are a really good piece for habitats like this. Always good to use some of the pieces in the habitat menu rather than just the construction and nature menu. Put all their enrichment in, again trying to concentrate most of it near the windows so the guests get a good view. We can sort of drag the animals around to where we want them to be. And I'm also going to put a mister in as well. Do this a lot. Obviously this is a North American animal. This zoo is going to be a lot warmer than it's used to. A skunk would, according to the game, according to some of my other research, would be okay in these temperatures, even though it's a lot hotter than it would be back home, because even in the parts of North America that they live in, obviously in summer it does get pretty hot. So this is just sort of slightly warmer than that all year round. They should be okay with it, but misters are good for keeping animals cool. Obviously it's more of a sort of a misting spray than the fog effect you get in the game, but it should sort of bring that to mind, and it also adds a nice bit of movement to the habitat. We'll put a wall in here to separate off the inside, and we'll put some ivy in to cover this up. I really like the variegated ivy piece, but it's pretty small unfortunately. There's no like really big ones like this, and I didn't want it to look copy and pasted, so I've just gone with the old ivy there. Sink some of the ponytail palms into the ground as always. Pretty much can't build a habitat without those now. And then some more of these fallen leaves to give it the North American vibe. And then I'm just going to put another layer of bricks along the bottom and a few bushes to make the outside look good and start getting close to where we want to be. And then we'll tidy up this side of the habitat. Make sure that the door is actually visible and the keepers aren't just going to walk straight through a wall. And then it's on to the last few sort of touch-ups to get this looking nice. So I'm going to put some decals along the bottom of the glass just to make it a bit more realistic, and then some, I don't know what they call the imperfections in the wood. Is it called a wall? A wall? No idea. And then we'll get onto the lighting. This is really tricky, trying to get it in here without it reflecting too much on the glass. That big red sort of splash of colour you can see there is actually the setting sun, not one of these lights, so I can change that later for the cinematics. I'm going to get some red lights and some blue lights in to simulate Moonlight, and that's the habitat pretty much done. I like to think it is small but perfectly formed. Let me know in the comments what you think of it. And here it is. Certainly the best rectangular habitat I've ever built, I think. The striped skunks might not be the most exciting animal in the game, and they are so small it's really hard to build for them, but I think it's well worth it, especially when they're playing with their tennis balls. Next up, it's the red pandas. Here's the progress we've made so far. Let's go. So this is going to be the start of a little Asian area in our Moonlight World Zoo. and I want it to be really immersive, so I'm going to be running a path through this little sort of jungle that I've made here, and then clearing the path out and getting the habitat right in this little spot here. I want you to be able to see the raccoons and the aviary for the bats in the background when you're looking at this build, just sort of subtly away in the distance with some lights, because obviously it's a nighttime zoo, so lights are really important. And we're again going to be drawing inspiration from the Singapore Night Safari. I saw a really cute habitat for pangolins there, and I'm going to replicate that to a certain extent for the red pandas. And like I said before, we're going to try and have something unique in each build. So in this build, I'm going to try and build a little tree house for the pandas that's going to be about as small as I can get it. It's not going to be usable. Obviously, this is Planet Zoo. You can either have big and usable or small and not usable. So I'm going to go with small and not usable today. We're going to keep them in with a moat. Although, having started this habitat, I discovered that they can swim, thanks to a post from Just Goron. So we're going to have to add some little barriers as well on the sort of guest side of the moat, so just to make sure that they can't get out. And I'm going to dress this up with some rocks to get this looking nice and smooth. And this is how the moat was in the habitat that I was getting my inspiration from as well. So spent quite a lot of time on this little bit here, just making sure that the edges of the little river looked sort of natural in a man-made way, if that makes sense, and just making sure it was attractive. So we'll copy these rocks over to the other side and then make any necessary adjustments so they line up with the river. I wanted this to be sort of curved, so it's not just a sort of a straight moat that looks really unattractive. I want it to look nice in a design to be nice, even if it is man-made kind of way. We'll get the terrain nice and flat at this bit and then make it slightly rough behind that for interest. And yeah, that's the sort of the holding part of the habitat done. We'll get into the main part of the habitat now. This video is going to jump a lot between day and night. Apologies for that, but I can't build the whole thing at night because I can't see what I'm doing. But I need to know what it's going to look like at night, because that's how it's going to be viewed. So like this concrete wall, for instance, blends nicely into the background at night once I've got all the foliage in front of it. In the day, it's really noticeable. So I've gone with a sort of medium brown. It's nice and dark at night time. And we'll make sure that the habitat's pretty small to get the viewing opportunities as good as possible, with the red pandas being pretty small little guys. And I'm using individual concrete wall sections to build this rather than the concrete barriers, just to get away from the big sort of posts that are there by default when you use the in-game barriers. It takes a lot longer doing it this way. You've also got more control over the exact colour. So I really want this to, like I say, sort of sit away in the background so you can't really see it. And then we'll cover it up with loads of plants, starting with these. So my favourite plant in the game, the ponytail palm. We're going to sink this way down next to the river so it looks like little reeds, because I saw some reeds poking out in the reference photo that I was using. So we'll get a nice little arrangement of these, get them sunk way down and then copy them all the way across the front of the habitat here. The idea being that you'll barely see them, they just add a bit of interest to the build. And then we'll cover up the ends of the walls with some more of the ponytail palms, but just positioning them a bit higher. And then we're going to go crazy with foliage here. I want the outside of the habitat, or the edge of the habitat rather, to be completely covered in plants, so you can barely see the wall, and it really gives you that sort of jungly feel where it sort of, you can't really tell where the habitat ends and the jungle behind it begins. So using loads of different plants here, and then I want to keep the central area pretty much empty, and that's where all the climbing and the little tree house and things like that are going to go. So just a few more tropical plants around the edge to get this really nice and filled up, and then we'll take a look at it at night time and make sure we're happy with how it's looking. Nice, okay, let's get on to the treehouse. So ignore the box to the left, that took me absolutely ages to build to get that little hole in it in the middle, but I decided I didn't like it and it was a bit big. So that sort of hangs around in the habitat for a bit and then ends up getting deleted. So forget that, concentrate on this little one to the side. I want to make a really cute little tree house like you often see in red panda habitats that's going to be attached to a tree. Like I say, they won't actually be able to get in or out of it, but it's just going to look cute. Using the Twilight Pack planks for this, which are nice and small, and then just a little arch shape to simulate the hole that they're going to get through. In the one to the left, I actually managed to get a working hole using some tiny little pieces. Obviously they still wouldn't be able to get through it, so it seemed kind of pointless. It was more of a technical achievement than anything actually useful for the build, so I decided to get rid of it. But this looks nice and cute. We'll put some decals and things like that on it. I get some even smaller planks in here so that we can make sure there's no gaps, and it looks like a nice solid little tree house that would keep them out of any inclement weather. I gotta say, I'm amazed how much I'm using these Twilight Pack pieces. I thought it might be a bit specific when it was announced, but I'm definitely using these more than I use the Conservation Pack pieces, even though I was really excited about new concrete and backstage stuff in that pack. But some of the little wood pieces and the stone pieces are just so good that yeah, I'm using them all the time. I was going to put that little window thing in, but I decided to get rid of that in the end. But yeah, that's the tree house. We'll just attach it to this tree, and then we'll get a little climbable log so that or it looks at least like the red pandas could get in here. So just fiddling around with these climbable log pieces. I've not seen them climb these ones too much, maybe because there's not really anywhere for them to go once they get to the top of it, but I really like the way it looks. Looks like a nice natural log, and with it being a birch, it also looks a bit more like the sort of temperate / cold kind of tree that the red pandas would have in their natural environment. Like I said, we'll put some decals on it as well, give it a nice weathered look, like it's got some moss up on the roof. I'm just going to recolor these rocks, get them a bit closer to the reference image I was looking at, and then we're going to hide a forage feeder into the floor here. This is always one of my favourite things to do, just subtly raise the terrain all the way around the edges of it, so it looks just like a little patch of mulch and food for the pandas rather than this big octagonal enrichment item. And then we're going to put some of Caesar Create's climbable dead trees into the habitat, which I'm going to edit a bit to suit my purposes. These are really good. I think they're made for big cats, definitely not made for red pandas, so they're going to need a lot of adjusting to make them climbable for these guys, but it's worth doing because I really like the way they look, especially at night. You can't see the sort of contrast between the brown trunk and the white branches when it's at night time. They look really realistic and a lot more interesting than just some more climbing. And there were some really cool little fake trees in the habitat that I was looking at, and we don't really have that in the game. So this is about as close as you can get. I didn't think I could do it any better than Caesar did, so I just used his and modified it quite a bit to get it to work for the pandas. We'll put a little door in, and then we will light the habitat up with the lights that we created back in the raccoons. Still really enjoying how these work, and then we'll carry on making adjustments to the trees to get them to work properly for the pandas, and drop a bit of this variegated ivy on top of the walls just to break up the outline so it's not ruler straight at the top. This is really effective once it's placed all the way around it. Really breaks up the outline and stops you from looking at the wall, just makes you concentrate on the habitat instead. So I actually put the pandas into the habitat just to keep adjusting and adjusting and adjusting until finally got the climbable trees to work, and then they'll happily walk back and forth along the rope, which is exactly what I want them to do. It stops them from spending all their time on the ground, which obviously you would not see red pandas do. And that's the habitat. I really hope you enjoy it. This is my favourite part of the habitat, the rope that you can use to climb from one side to the other. It looks really good, and the lighting seems to be particularly effective in this habitat as well. Let's see how the zoo's coming together. This is our little Asian area. Now it's time for some beavers. I've already done the terrain and the water. We're going to get straight into the theming. So this is based on a habitat in a zoo called the Wildlands Adventure Zoo in the Netherlands, which I'd never heard of until I started doing some research for this episode. They've got a really cool beaver habitat, which is themed around a sawmill, which I thought was really cute, considering what beavers are known for. So the first thing that we're going to do is work on this piece of equipment or machinery. I guess it's equipment. I don't think it's got any sort of moving parts in it, which I presume is for holding logs while you saw them. I've never worked as a lumberjack, you're probably not surprised to know, so I'm not 100% sure what this does. It just looks really cool, and it was in the habitat, so that's what we're going to build. It was quite tough to build this lots of different pieces, tried to get the exact effect I wanted. At the bottom, it's, well, pretty much the whole thing's made out of metal. And so I tried loads of different pieces to get the right one. I ended up using these girder pieces because they're recolorable. I want this big bright yellow caution sign, so I needed to find something that was flat and metallic so it looks right, and this was the piece I ended up using. There's a whole lot cut out of this video of me testing different pieces to get it right, but I'm really happy with how it looks at the end. And we've got some more girders to form the sort of rusted piece of metal that the sign sits on as well. And we're going to use these different types of girders to build the actual sort of structural support for this contraption. So we'll copy those over there and then use even more girder pieces to make the top of it. I've never used so many girders in one build before. Make a few tweaks to it, and like I say, when we're done with this, I'm really happy with it. We're going to put some signs on it. This took a bit of doing to get it to look exactly the way I wanted it, but I ended up using 3 signs to get the shape that I wanted for the Moonlight Sawmill, as it's going to be called, as it's in this zoo. And do some recoloring, just try and get that rusty old kind of look that I'm going for. I don't know if what they've got in the zoo is something they've built themselves, or it's an old bit of scrap that they've, you know, recovered from a sawmill. I'm presuming it's that. And then we're going to do some more work on the sign, sink some of these little signs in here to get the full big sign that I want, and then we're going to use loads of decals to give this the proper weathered, rusty old bit of metal look that I'm going for. Honestly, I don't know what we did before decals in this game. It's such a game changer, these things, especially for making stuff like this. So we're going to have some coloured the same colour as the sign to serve as sort of wear, and then I'll have this one a dark brown, like a big patch of rust, and I'll go absolutely crazy with those decals later and put loads of them on there, but we won't show all of that. But yeah, it looks really old and weathered when we're finished with it, which is exactly what I'm going for. We'll put some smaller pieces in as well for the structural supports at the side. And then I'm going to use I think this is a wheelbarrow handle from the conservation pack to hang a giant log from it, and some of my new favourite piece, the Twilight Pack chains. I'm just trying to replicate exactly what I saw in the photos and videos that I looked at of this habitat. Get something that looks really like it is from an old sawmill. So I spent a lot of time on this little part of the build, because I really wanted it to be perfect, spinning all the chains around and recoloring everything and just trying to get it exactly, or as close as I could anyway, to the reference material that I was using. Another thing I saw in the reference material which I really liked is a lodge for the beavers. I don't know if it was a brilliantly done piece of theming or if the beavers actually built it themselves, but an actual lodge that beavers build out of sticks where they live in the middle of the water so that other animals can't get to them. That was not easy to build, but I got there in the end, and we will take a look at that a bit later in the video. But I'm really happy with how that turned out. That might be my favourite part of the build. And then we'll put the beaver enrichment item in. So it always destroys the train when you put it in there, so we need to build that back up again. And then it's just a case of mucking around with this for absolutely ages. So I wanted it to join the water, and later on we'll use the water special effects pieces to make the join more seamless. But if it's actually in water, according to my attempts anyway, the beavers won't use it. So you've got to be really careful about the water placement, and eventually, and I'll spare you watching the ages and ages of me trying to get it to work, but eventually I managed to get it in the place that I wanted it and get the beavers using it as well. You'll see that in the end cinematics, but that is really cool when they do that. This is a bit of it here. I noticed I sort of got it working, and then you can see the beavers are walking in midair, but when I lowered the terrain, you can see the beaver sort of lowering down until he's at ground level. And yeah, now it works nicely. Now let's get on to the lodge. So like I say, it took a while to work out how I was going to do this, but I'm really pleased with the final result. So we're going to use the rotation trick, basically a load of these branches from the nature tab. Just put them in as randomly as possible so it looks like the beavers made it themselves. And once you've got a nice little arrangement, we're just going to spin this around on itself and then fill in the top, and we have a beaver lodge. I'm going to put this on the workshop if you want to use it in your habitats and you don't want to make it yourself. Obviously it doesn't function in the game. I think you could get it to work with building it in this style, but you need to make it a lot bigger so that the beavers could get in from underwater and then climb up into, you know, a platform inside of it. But yeah, this one isn't functional. I just think it looks really cool, and that's very important in my zoos. So yeah, I'm just going to make a few copies of it. I didn't quite make it big enough even for this habitat because I didn't want to make the water any shallower. And yeah, I think this looks pretty effective. And now we're going to join the enrichment item and the waterfall onto the river. So it looks like the water is flowing from the waterfall through the enrichment item, over the rocks, and then down into the main body of water. And then we're going to put loads of logs and branches all over the habitat to give it that beavery feel. Not sure beavery is a word. And then the last thing we're going to do is build a custom fence for the side of the habitat. You saw me earlier put the normal fences around it. I really wasn't happy with them. I've kept them at the back, but at the front what I'm going to do is make the in-game railings look a lot more substantial and put some wood at the top of it that is sticking out into the habitat so that even if the beavers manage to climb up onto the bottom of the path, which is raised, they still wouldn't be able to climb up and over and get out of the habitat. And that is the Beaver Sawmill done, pretty much. We just need to light it up, because obviously this is a Moonlight zoo, so we're going to put some lanterns and then some of the big floodlights everywhere, and we are done.
This beaver enrichment pool is so cool. The animations are amazing. Not sure how realistic it is. What does the zoo do? Just are we going to plant a new tree every day? But it's a lot of fun to watch them use it. I'm really happy with how this habitat turned out. Let's see what effect it's had on the zoo as a whole. And then we're going to try something really difficult. So if you've ever tried to breed the melanistic silver foxes in this game, you will know the pain that this is going to put me through. They are so rare, we're going to need to do a hell of a lot of breeding. So I figured rather than just sort of throwing down a load of fences and just breeding for hours until I got them, it'd be cool to actually build some little sort of off-show breeding pens and actually have something that we can leave in the zoo when I'm finished breeding the foxes. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to build the smallest, cheapest habitat I've ever built, get the silver foxes bred, and then we will move on to building the big, beautiful habitats that they're actually going to live in. So these cages are in between the raccoon habitat and the staff buildings near the entrance. And like I say, I want to leave them here when we're done. So there's a backstage, off-show area that you can glimpse from different places in the zoo. Sort of thing you sometimes see between habitats when you go to the zoo. I thought that would be cool. Really enjoyed building a rectangle as well. So much easier than the stuff we normally build on the channel. I might just make all my habitats rectangular in future, just to save time and do 7 videos a week. But don't worry, the habitats that we're going to build in a minute are a lot more complex. But yeah, we've got loads of aluminium on here, or corrugated iron, whatever it is, and the mesh, and just trying to make it look as basic and cheap and thrown together as possible. It's supposed to look like a holding pen, really, where an animal would be in between being moved from one habitat to the other or something like that. And then just going to copy it across and get 4 habitats here, and then join it up to the staff buildings and start trying to breed these silver foxes. Let's get some foxes in, and then we'll get them on all 4 pens, start them breeding, and wait till we get a silver fox. I'm sure it won't take too long. Yeah. Okay, try like 50 years, but there we go, a silver fox. They are so beautiful. I got so many of the black foxes, piebald, white foxes, but eventually I got a silver fox. So now we can start building the aviaries that they're actually going to live in. So I had a vision for this habitat where, a vision, I sound like some sort of evangelical preacher, not that kind of vision, like an idea for this habitat where there'd be a wide path like I've built here with trees on either side, like big evergreen trees, and then the guests would have like glimpses of foxes on either side of the path, almost like they were walking through a forest. The other thing I thought of was having some mesh that was sort of curved away from the path with the habitat behind it. And that was really all I had when I started building. Normally I like to plan things out pretty extensively before I actually start building. So there's quite a lot of jumping around in this speed build as I sort of do a bit, look at it and think, yeah, that's good. And then later on look at it and think, no, that needs a bit more work. But what I'm doing here is getting the first part done, which is the curved mesh that's going to be the front of the habitat. So you can see the two sort of wooden boxes on either side of the path. That's a rough size of what the habitats are going to be. And then basically I'm just going to build this habitat on this side, which is for the red foxes. And when I'm completely happy with that, I'm just going to blueprint it and copy it across to the other side, and then tweak a few bits here and there to have the silver foxes in that one, so that there's sort of two distinct populations. It's basically an aviary. It's quite common to keep cats and foxes, raccoons, anything that's pretty good at climbing and pretty good at escaping, really. If you mesh over the whole habitat, then as long as you don't have any holes in it, you're not going to have any issues with escapes. I really like building aviaries. It's one of my favourite things to do in Planet Zoo. But as well as all the mesh, I'm going to have some of these rusted metal poles from the Australia pack, which I really like, in the back. And I'll keep on adding more and more of those until I feel like it would stand up. Always useful. And then we'll get some more of these cables on the side of it until it starts looking like a proper aviary. Get more mesh in on the side. Always fun working with this stuff. But it looks pretty good when it's done. This one, I like the way the mesh sort of curves around on these sides and then is curved towards the back as well. And then any bits where the mesh is a bit overlapping and doesn't look too good, we'll just put some foliage in front of it. Classic way to hide anything in Planet Zoo. And yeah, like this little bit here, probably could look a little bit better, but nobody's going to see that apart from you guys, so I'm quite happy to leave that as it is. We'll copy this across to the other side and then get rid of all the sort of stuff in there to make it easier to build. And then the other thing I'm going to do is have the terrain raised from the path all the way to the back of the habitat, which is the classic zoo trick to make sure the animals are always visible. They get higher as they get further away from you and closer to the floor as they get closer to you. So there's always a good sight line. Foxes aren't the biggest of animals, so I wanted them to have a decent sized habitat, but obviously you also want the guests to see them, especially in a nighttime zoo like this. We'll put the trees in that I mentioned, and then we're going to have a row of bushes as well to stop people from going beyond the path and getting their fingers nipped off by a fox. There'll be a fence here, of course, as well. I'm just trying to get that sort of temperate North American forest vibe here with all these bushes. Get a few more of these poles in, like I said before, just trying to make sure it looks structurally sound. I've got the big concrete bases on as well, and this is starting to look like something I'm happy with, really. Get a few more of these down here, and I'll put a few more of the poles at the back as well. Then we're going to put in this shelter, which I actually took from the raccoon habitat, because I thought it would suit the fox habitat as well. And it's just one that's going to sit right at the back of the habitat. It's not something you're really supposed to notice, but I thought would be cool would be if the foxes could actually climb on top of it. Obviously with the whole habitat being meshed over, there's no worries about them escaping no matter how high they get. So I thought allowing them to go on top of the habitat would be cool. Next up, we're going to put the barriers in. So just going to run this all the way around, and it's going to have like a sort of indent in it where that shelter is, so that the keeper gate actually is at the front of the shelter, so that the staff don't just sort of materialise through one of the door pieces. They've actually got a door to open. And then I think with this one extra crossbeam, I'm finally happy with the look of the aviary. And it's onto the enrichment items, so just put loads of enrichment around for the foxes. I love the animation where they jump into the cardboard box, so loads of those about. And I'm going to put a scent marker enrichment up on top of the shelter as well to give the foxes a reason to go up there. You'll see that in the cinematics at the end. And then I'm going to do loads of foliage work around the sides of the aviary, just to really sort of sell the idea that this is in a temperate forest rather than in Singapore, where the zoo itself is set. And I'll keep doing that until I'm happy with the way it looks. It's time to blueprint the habitat and copy it across for the grey foxes. Widen the path, get the trees copied across, make some little tweaks to the grey fox habitat, and that is the sort of avenue of foxes done. Let's check it out. I really like how this looks. Put a little sign in there as well. Here's the red foxes up on the roof that we gave them access to. And here's one of the grey foxes. So gorgeous. This habitat makes a big difference to the overall size of the zoo, but we've just about got space behind it to squeeze in a habitat for the 9-banded armadillo. So I wanted to try something that I've never done before with this build, which was to build a sort of display lawn like you often see in zoos, where they have ambassador animals, happy sort of meeting guests, and you can get up close and personal with them, sometimes handle them depending on the species, etc. And armadillos are often used for that purpose. So it's gonna be quite a simple looking build, but with a few different things going on inside the habitat. So firstly, I'm going to be using the guest seating, which I have literally never used before, and then put an animal talk point in. And then we'll have a guest gate as well, which I forgot I needed. You can see how I never do builds like this. So we put the guest gate in so that we can get guests actually into the habitat. And then we'll have an animal talk point, and we're going to set it up so this would be like an extra experience that you had to pay for to do, rather than just something anyone can wander into. That's the concept. I think I'm going to try and link it up with the new guided tours as well, once I get my head around how they work. Obviously we need a path for the guests to go through, and then we'll build everything around that path. And then a lot of the time is going to be spent so that you can't really tell where the path starts and where the path ends, so it doesn't look like it does at the moment, if you see what I mean. But before we get onto that, we need to do something about the entrance. I'm not a huge fan of the guest gate, the fact that there's only one to choose from, and it's this huge wooden sort of gate. It's not great unless that's the actual theme you're going for. So I guess we need to embrace the whole being made of wood aspect. There's not much I can do about that. So I'm just going to try and make it look a bit more attractive and make it fit the theme of this Armadillo Adventure. So we'll get a load of the wood planks in. We're going to do some lettering and just make this look like a proper entrance rather than just this huge gate stuck in the middle of the habitat for no reason. So I'm going to use some of White Andrew's Workshop's amazing font. I forget what this font is called, but it's a really nice one. It's quite zooey looking and pretty modern as well, which I like. So going to make a sign with this, and then move it onto the wood panelling above the guest gate that we just put in there. There are so many amazing fonts on the workshop, made by Wyatt and Ricey and people like that. I try and use them as much as possible in my builds, just to make them look a bit more interesting rather than using the in-game fonts. So this is still looking pretty basic at the moment. We've got a lot more to do to it. We just need to bulk up this surround so it looks more cohesive with the guest gate itself. So we'll get these planks into the right position. We're going to copy the planks on top of each other loads of times to sort of thicken them up and give the impression that they would actually be holding up this sign and are part of the gate rather than just something that's been stuck onto the gate. And we'll come back to that in a second. I just want to do a little bit of work on the inside of the habitat as well and start working out how this is going to look. Sand seems to be a popular choice for these sort of display areas, either sand or just some sort of scrubby grass, but the sand blends in better with the wood chippings. We're going to drop one of the Moonlight World shelters in the back here so the armadillos have somewhere to go when they are not on the display lawn area. And then just adjust the fence a bit so that we can get some null barriers in here. I also wanted to make a little queue for the front of it, just a place where people would stand while they were waiting to go in. So we'll chuck a few pieces in and just make a sort of queue thing here. And getting back to the guest gate, one of the things I'd really like Frontier to consider would be if you could somehow link guest gates to animal talks, so that the guest gate only opens when there's an animal talk on. So with a sort of display lawn habitat like this, when the animal talk is running, it looks so good. You got the guests up in the seating. There's a few guests stood around the animal talk point, which I'm just going to put in here. And I've put a table with food on it next to it. So it looks like it'd be a proper animal encounter where the armadillo would be up on the table, people could feed it, maybe hold it, etc. The issue is when there isn't an animal talk on, and you can only have like one a year, then it becomes just a standard walkthrough exhibit. And I don't really like the way it looks when it's a standard walkthrough exhibit, because you wouldn't really have a big walkthrough with two tiny little armadillos in it. You know, there's just way more people than animals. They're only tiny. You know, they'd probably be at risk of getting stepped on. It's not ideal. It's really designed specifically for the animal talk, and it'd be great to be able to link those up. What I'm doing here is using decals to blur the edges between the path and the sand. I really like the effect of that. This is what I was saying at the start about getting the habitat to look cohesive rather than the really straight edges of the paths all the way around. I'm going to drop a forage feeder in here, as we do so often on this channel. And now we're going to build a little display table so that the armadillo could be brought up here and sort of placed on the table so that people could see him. Had a sort of choice with this. Do I build a little ramp going up to the table so the armadillo in the game can get up there? Although how often will they actually do that? Probably not very often, and you know, it doesn't look that realistic. So I decided to build it in a more realistic fashion like this, and then for the cinematics I am literally just going to move the armadillo up here, and he or she can just chill out on the table for the purposes of the cinematics. We'll get some railings in for the seats at the back and then start dropping some rocks in. I don't know why I never realised this before, but it only occurred to me building this that you can use the really long rocks turned on their sides to make tiny little rocks. And a lot of the reference material I was looking at for these types of habitats, loads of tiny little rocks in, so I've done that. And then this is the Moonlight world, so we're going to put some lights in for nighttime. But the concept for this build is that because this is a paid experience, this would be timed at the very opening of the zoo about 5 PM. So it would still be nice and sunny like this when you got there. The armadillos will be just waking up and the guests can see them. But obviously we want some light so that the whole area isn't just completely dark at night time. And with this ramp, we are pretty much done building. We just need to get some foliage in here to bring a splash of colour, bring the place to life. So we'll get loads of different plants scattered around and fill in the area on the outside of this display area as well, so it sits in nicely with the rest of the zoo. We're just past the red foxes here, sort of on the curve that's going to bring us round to the Asian area of the zoo. So we'll get all of this in, and that's pretty much it. Then it's time to bring in the armadillos and the educator and the guests and take a look at how it looks. Here's the armadillo up on his little table. This took some doing to get him up here. He doesn't spend very long there, spends more time on his ramp and running around on the floor, but he also interacts with the guests, or seems to at least, because this is sort of the edge of his habitat. It's really effective, and it's fun to get in the daylight for a while as well. You can just see the little habitat appearing in the top right. And now it's time for the final habitat. This zoo, as you know, is based on the Singapore Night Safari, which I think I've described as the only nocturnal zoo in the world. Well, it turns out there's another one in Bali called the Bali Night Safari. Really original name there. And from what I've seen of it, they pay less attention to health and safety than they do in the Singapore Night Safari, because this is absolutely crazy. This is based on a real experience that you can do in the Bali Night Safari, where basically they load you into the back of a truck in a big cage, drive you into a tiger habitat, and then feed the tigers, and the tigers are jumping all over the truck. I thought that would be a really cool thing to do in Planet Zoo. Problem is, of course, we don't have any trucks, and we don't really have any way of getting guests inside the habitat. So it's taken a long time to build this. But what I'm going to do is firstly get a little path suspended in midair behind this Jeep that you can see here. And we're going to get some guests onto it. And then we're going to build the truck that the guests are going to stand in. This is not really my forte, building mechanical objects or things that aren't in the game out of tiny little pieces. But I wanted to give it a go, and I'm pretty pleased with the final result. So yeah, let's talk about the build. So the key thing to achieve here really is to make sure that this piece of path, which is just floating in midair, is completely covered up so that you can't see that the guests are standing on a path. It looks like they're standing in a truck. And they also need to cover up the little bit of path underneath it so that you can't see it sort of joined onto the ground with the big lump of concrete that automatically comes in underneath it. So gonna build the truck bed around it using loads of mesh, and we're going to use a lot of the Twilight pack pieces. I think that pack is possibly the most underrated pack in Planet Zoo, presumably because it was full of animals that you can see in your backyard in America. It did not go down well in the US, but I was really happy to get raccoons. The main thing I like about it is the building pieces. There are some building pieces in the Twilight pack which I pretty much use in almost every build now. I probably used them in the first build in this zoo because it was all shiny and new, but since then I've found myself just using them in pretty much every build, like I say, because they are so good. And one of the best pieces is the, I think it's called the portcullis metal strip or something along those lines, but it's a really long thin piece of metal. It comes in 3 different sizes. It's got a beautiful texture on both sides, which is different on both sides, and it's flexi-color. And when it comes to building in Planet Zoo, thin metal, 3 different sizes, flexi-color, that is pretty much everything you want. So we're going to bring that piece in a minute, and I'm going to use it for loads of different things in this build. Firstly, I'm just going to get some of the conservation pack pieces in to do a bit of detailing under the truck bed, just to try and make it look a bit more like an actual vehicle. They don't need to represent any sort of specific piece. Just anything like this thrown under it is going to make it look more real and more like a real vehicle, like I say. So we use a few different pieces, anything that looks like it might work for that kind of thing. And you can see the little bit of concrete under the path that I was talking about. So I'm going to use these to cover that up. And again, it just looks like the underside of the truck. It's going to look way better when this is all in here. So loads of these are a really versatile piece. I think I use these for trays in a restaurant in Tecton Zoo. And this is the portcullis piece that I was talking about. It is so good. I'm going to use this to turn the little open top Jeep, which is not a type of Jeep you want to drive into a tiger habitat, into a Jeep with a roof and sides. And we'll put some mesh on it as well and just build this up so it looks like a proper sort of 4x4 with no way for the tigers to get in and eat the driver, which is always useful. And I mentioned about the different sizes of the piece as well, and the fact that it's got 2 different textures just lets you do stuff like this. Once this is finished up, we've got some decals and stuff on it. It looks really good. I'm really pleased with it. What I'm doing here is building up the floor. So I want the floor in the center to be at the exact level of the path, or well, one pixel above the path, I guess, so that the guests' feet are in the right place and they're not sinking into the ground. And then I'll cover up the edges of the path with the wood that you can see there. Then we'll put in a exhaust for the trailer. I'm not sure if the trailer would have its own exhaust, really. Don't know if it'd need an engine, but I like the look of it and I like the smoke that you can get to come out of it, so I thought I'd do that. And then we'll do some more detailing on the Jeep itself, get some stuff up on the roof, and we'll get a decal, or a sign rather, on the side. One of the Australia pack signs, which are really good because the background of the sign is flexi-color, so we can match this up exactly, there we go, with the colour of the Jeep. And then inside, I'm just replicating exactly what I saw on the Bali Night Safari. So there were some bars here, presumably to stop the guests from going right up to the cage and having their fingers bitten off. And there's also some hooks hanging down from the ceiling, like you get on a subway, which I'll put in a minute. And then we've got these flags as well. I never used these flags up until I built the snow leopard habitat in Tecton Zoo, because there's a zebra flag and a leopard flag. I didn't realise they were flexi-color. So they're actually really versatile because, as you can see, the zebra flag can become a tiger flag with a change of colour. The leopard flag can double as a snow leopard flag. I guess you could do a jaguar as well, sort of. There's more things that you can do with them than you think, so I thought I'd get those in as well, just to try and make this look a bit more attractive. And then we're going to make it twice as long. I was sort of umming and ahhing over how big to make this, but the one I was looking at was about twice as long as what I started with, so I decided to just double it, make it look a bit less like a box. And there's that Twilight Pack piece again to get some more detail and texture onto the steps down from the back of the van. We're going to get some meat in a tray here, or as close to meat as you can get when you're using a flexi-color pumpkin. I think this looks alright once it's done, once we get a few of these in here. Like a big old slab of meat or a few slabs of meat that the keepers would chuck out into the habitat or put on the end of like a pole, feed the tigers through. And that's the tiger truck done. So now it's on to the habitat itself. So I want this habitat to be really simple. I want the focus to be on this ridiculous arrangement in the middle, and the rest of the habitat, obviously we're going to make it look nice, but it's going to be pretty simple. A lot of foliage, big shelter for the tigers right at the back, so nothing sort of pulling focus from the truck in the middle. So I'm going to get some rocks here, which is how they do it in the Bali Night Safari, where the tigers are climbing up onto these rocks, jumping on top of the truck, and just generally looking impressive. And then we'll sort out the barriers around the side. I'm going to go mainly with the in-game barriers here, and then do some custom fence posts for them. It just makes it much easier to get the anti-climb barriers in if we use this steel mesh. And then we'll put some doors in where the truck would go in and out of the habitat, separate from the keeper gate, and make sure that doesn't interfere with the path where the guests are going to go. So we'll use the big animal doors for this. It's a really nice piece that I very rarely use. And then we're going to draw in the sort of disturbed ground where the trucks would drive in and out of the habitat. Obviously we want that to be separate from the guest path. That'll be a separate little entrance, presumably it'll be like a paid experience for people. Get some more foliage in, and then rough up the terrain a little bit, make it a bit more interesting, and then put a shelter in. So this shelter is based on an old shelter from Tepton Zoo that I never ended up using because it didn't really fit the style of the habitat that it was originally intended for. So I thought with some modifications and a little tigerish colour scheme, we can spin this round, get this built up, and just put it at the back of the habitat. Like I say, I don't want anything pulling focus from the tiger truck, so this will go right at the back, surrounded by trees, and it just gives the tigers somewhere to go to get away from the guests and sleep, etc. So make some modifications to the fences, just so this sits in nicely, make that a null barrier, and sort out the middle. And then all that remains is to get some more grasses and plants into the habitat. I'm going to use one of these massive kapok, I never know how to pronounce that, trees in there. And then loads of the new buffalo grass, which we will cover the entire habitat with, which I think we'll be doing for most habitats from now on. It just looks so good. And the last thing to do is get a standoff barrier in around the outside of the habitat for the guests who haven't paid to actually go in there, just to make sure that they are safe as well, probably safer than the people in the van. And yeah, that's the build done. And here we go, the final habitat in the Moonlight world, possibly the silliest habitat I've ever built, but I really like it. I love how the guests basically jump up and down screaming because I've trapped them on the path there. And with the tigers roaming all around the cage and getting on top of it, etc., I think it's really cool. And here's the final part of our Nocturnal Zoo. I really hope you enjoyed this. If you want to see a full tour of the finished zoo, check out this video now. Thanks for watching. Bye.